The box office numbers for Endgame are out for Sunday, and it has slightly more than $45 million to go to become the biggest film of all time. The current official total for Avengers Endgame is $2,730,565,940. That's made up with about $824 million from the US domestic market, which is still the second biggest film ever there after Star Wars The Force Awakens, and $1.9 billion from the international box office, which is also the second biggest ever after Avatar. With these very large amounts of money, this $45 million seems very easy to do, but I don't think that it can actually do it. I think about $30 million is probably around about what Endgame's going to get over the top where it is here, and it needs about $45 million more. But let's have a little look at the breakdown and see where I'm coming up with those figures and see if maybe it can get more than this $45 million it needs to become the biggest film of all time. Once again, here is our chart for the US domestic numbers. We've got Star Wars The Force Awakens up the top in the blue line. We've got Avengers Endgame in the red. There's a couple other films here, but the main one to look at is Infinity War. It's not that easy to tell looking just at the graph here, but Infinity War is actually earning slightly more money at this point in time than Endgame. So the lines are both flattening out in a very similar manner. And again, looking at the chart, it's very hard to tell, but they're flattening out in quite a similar way, as opposed to what's happening with Star Wars The Force Awakens. You can see Star Wars The Force Awakens is still steadily earning just a bit more money than Endgame. So we really want to compare what Endgame probably can get from this point out to what Infinity War did, because they're running at a fairly similar rate. There's a big gap between them, but the actual rate they're running at this point in time is very similar. And if you look at the raw numbers, Endgame on the left here, Infinity War on the right, day 45 is the Sunday we've just had. That is the last actual day we've had for Endgame so far. And Infinity War had a total at this point in time of $655 million compared to the $824 million for Endgame. So Endgame's still far, far ahead, as we saw on the chart. But if we just look at the numbers here for the last 2 weeks or so, we can see that Infinity War out-earned it every single day. So every single day, Infinity War earned a bit more money than Endgame. Endgame, for these last 2 weeks, is running at about 80% of what Infinity War actually earned. So what Infinity War got, Endgame's been getting about 80% of that. And this chart here shows that a bit more clearer than just looking at the raw numbers itself. There's about 3 weeks of data here. For around about the first week, they're basically neck and neck. So Endgame and Infinity War about 3 weeks ago were earning around about the same every day. But then after that point, about 2 weeks ago, Infinity War started steadily out-earning it. Again, Endgame's getting about 80% of the money that Infinity War is. And so there's no reason to think that this won't continue. But this really shows us that Endgame will not earn more money than what Infinity War earned from this point in time on. Okay, there's no reason to think that this will reverse. It'll only either stay the same or it'll get worse. And I think it'll get worse. I think it'll stay at the 80% actual pace. But best case scenario, it'll earn exactly what Infinity War earned from this point on. But I think that's being fairly optimistic. So looking back again at these raw numbers, we can see that the total for Infinity War at the top left section there in blue is $678 million, and the current total for Infinity War at day 45 is $656 million. So it's got about $23.5 million extra from where it actually earned at this point on. So again, I think Endgame can't earn that much. Okay, but best case scenario, it'll now track Infinity War and it'll get another $23.5 million. But forgetting best case for the moment, if you take about 80% of this $23.5 million, we get $18.7 million. Let's just call it $19 million. So I think that's the best figure. To pick an exact figure, again, it's going to be in or out by millions of dollars, but to pick an actual exact figure right now, I think $19 million extra is a good number to use. So I think that is a very probable amount that Endgame will actually end up with, another $19 million. And if we take a look at the international numbers here, once again, I've got the totals for the Sundays. So at the end of the first Sunday, the first opening weekend, it had $866 million. Then it had $1.5 billion, which the middle column here has the difference between the Sundays. So it had $700 million for the next week, $193 million, then $82 million, $35 million, $18 million, and it just got $8.5 million for the Sunday to the Sunday we've just got here. So it had a 53.8% reduction, which is pretty close to the sort of 50% I assumed that it'll get around about. Now, that means that it'll probably still run at around about a 50% reduction from here on out, which means it'll be lucky to get another $8.5 million, but let's just call it $10 million. So from here on out, I think it'll, best case scenario, probably get $10 million extra in the international box office. And here in green is just my sort of prediction for next week. So if it gets another 50% reduction, it'll be $4.2 million for next week. Another 50% reduction, it'll be 2.1. Another 50% reduction, 1.1, and so on. So again, $10 million, I think, is probably on the upper range of what it'll probably get internationally from here. So if it's going to get around about $19 million in the US domestic market, and it's going to get maybe another $10 million internationally, that's not the $45 million that we need to beat Avatar. It's pretty close. It's about $15 million out, but it's not quite there. So what can we do to maybe bump the numbers up a bit more? Well, as I said before, kind of best case scenario, which I don't think will happen, is that Endgame will earn the exact same amount of money that Infinity War earned from this point in time on. Whereas the figure I used there, the $19 million, it was about 80% of what Infinity War actually earned. So if you use the $23.6 million, which is how much extra Infinity War will use, and let's just round it up to $24 million, if we get $24 million there, we've got $45 million to get. That means we need another $21 million internationally. So is it possible that in the international market, it could get another $21 million? And my short answer is no. Okay, I don't think you can get $21 million in the international market. Okay, I can make up some numbers and show how it could do it in theory. As I did last week, I said if it got a 35% reduction from the previous week to this week, and another 35% reduction next week, another 35% reduction, that would have gotten it roughly to the kind of figure it needed to do. And I did say I didn't think it had a chance of getting a 35% reduction, and it did get about a 50% reduction. And I think that's what it'll continue to do. So yeah, I could make up some numbers to show how it could, in theory, get $21 million. I don't think it's plausible that that can happen. So $21 million in the international, I don't think that that can happen at all. I really think that $10 million is about the best case scenario. But if we kind of bump that up, let's say to $15 million, which I don't think is realistic, but if we just go $15 million, that means that it needs $30 million extra in the US domestic market to actually beat Avatar. And that means the total that it will need to get is about $855 million. So if it can get $855 million in the US domestic market, then I think it is still possible that it could beat Avatar. I don't think it will get $855 million, but that's the kind of figure it probably needs, because the internationally is really nothing going on at all. So the international box office is not going to be doing a lot of help compared to what we'll still be getting from the US domestic market. And the other little thing to remember, as I've mentioned in several of these videos, is the total I'm using here for Avatar is $11 million less than some of the totals going around. The box office mojo number for Avatar is $11 million more than this figure here. So even if it does beat this figure, there's a chance that this isn't actually the Avatar total. It's $11 million less than what the box office mojo total for Avatar is. There's a few numbers floating around for Avatar, and basically everywhere agrees on what the US domestic market was, but there is an $11 million discrepancy on the international figures. And it's not that much money to really care about it normally, because it got $2.7 billion. But as Endgame's getting close to it here, this $11 million may be somewhat important, but I actually don't think it will, because I don't think it'll get to this lower figure anyway. So again, I think we're probably looking at maybe $30 million extra for Endgame. It needs about $45 million extra to get to this low figure, and it needs about $56 million to get to the box office mojo figure, which I obviously also don't think it'll happen. So unfortunately, I don't think it's going to get there. I don't think it'll beat Avatar. It's possible with sort of holidays coming up, right now school holidays coming up, it may get a bit more of an extra boost over what Infinity War did, but the fact of the matter is the amount of money it's getting right now, there's not much money there to increase. So even if it increases over the top where it is, it's basically going to be getting somewhere under $1 million probably during the week, and maybe they'll be increased to over $1 million. It's not that much money to actually start off with to then increase it up. But as usual, we'll have to see what the actual box office brings, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think Endgame is going to be the second biggest film ever, and Avatar's going to stay in number one. I don't think anything's going to beat Avatar this year. I guess there's two other big films coming out. I don't think either of them have a chance of beating it, but The Lion King and Star Wars Episode 9 are probably the last two big films that are left for the year. But again, I don't think they'll beat it. But other than that, I don't think there's any other film with a remote chance of getting close. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.